College football is back, and we're back on the big mountain where we bring you a fresh take on college football betting focused on the Big Ten and the Mountain West.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. I'm JY. This is my good friend Steve. We're going to do a week 2 reaction video to go over all of our picks here. I do want to highlight that we did well on our locks overall as a big mountain tandem. We were 3-1 with our locks, 2-1 for me, 1-0 for Steve, and on the season here, we're 5-3 on our locks. So some positives to start off the season with our locks, and we'll get into what those were this week. But we're going to turn things over to Steve here, let him go over all of his picks.
Okay, yeah. We had a great week for locks. I didn't do so great this week on some of my other picks, but we'll go through that. So first of all, the first game was Illinois and Kansas. I took Illinois +3. Obviously, Illinois is not living up to the standards I thought they would this year. And I have some interesting stats I think you'll like on this one, JY. Right. So in 2022, last year, Illinois had the #1 defense in the country.
Wow.
We talked about this in the preview show. They did lose some players on defense, and their defensive coordinator went on to become the coach at Purdue. Mm-hmm. I thought that they really would be able to keep going defensively based on who their head coach is, his track record, and they still had a lot of good players on defense. Sure. Well, so far, that's been totally wrong. So from last year, they were #1 defense in the country. They allowed 12.8 points per game and 273 yards per game. This year, through 2 games so far, so not a huge sample size, but we have multiple games. Yep. They are 106 in FBS in team defense. They're allowing 31 points per game, so more than twice as much, almost 3 times as many points per game. And they're allowing 447 yards per game.
Yikes.
So about almost 200 more yards per game than last year. So obviously their defense is not living up to that standard that was set last year, and their record reflects that. So, I'll have to make note of that moving forward. The next game was Purdue and Virginia Tech.
Yep.
I picked Virginia Tech to cover the 3 points. And you know what? And I said in my picks, I thought Purdue would be motivated. I just didn't think they'd be able to get it done.
Right.
Well, they went into Blacksburg. I mean, it was a battle of 2 just poor teams.
Right.
They had a big long rain delay.
Yes.
And Purdue picked up a good win on the road, so good for them.
Yep.
UNLV and Michigan, we both liked UNLV to cover.
Right.
Mostly just because Michigan style, their offense and what we thought would go on, they were just not going to be able to cover that 36.5 points.
Right.
And they didn't. Yet again, second week in a row, they didn't cover those points, so UNLV was the winner.
Yeah, and I'll add to that since I picked it as well. It's actually a lock. We might as well talk about it right now since we're talking about that game. And I watched most of this game. I wasn't really expecting to watch most of it, but I did. And wow, McCarthy with just a crazy start. I'll tell you what. The UNLV defense on running plays looked solid. Yeah. They were fine. But when it came to passing plays, I mean, they were playing a zone, and he was just zinging it through all the different holes. I mean, it was crazy. Every time he dropped back to throw, I went, oh, there's another reception. And it was. I mean, he started with 13 straight completions, and I think he ended the first half with, he was 17 of 18 or something like that. I mean, it was just – the pass defense was just not good.
Yep.
And they're as the game went on, I was hoping that they'd be bringing in their second, third stringers, which they did, which is why UNLV covered. Yep. That's the only reason why UNLV covered.
Yep.
But hey, a win's a win, a lock's a win, and I'll take it. I will say there was a potential roughing the kicker call. I don't remember it was late in the third or in the fourth. And, they just had a running into the kicker, and it was atrocious. I mean, the dude just blew him up. And if I'm a huge UNLV fan, I'm thinking, what are you guys doing? I mean, I saw one later on, and it wasn't nearly as bad in a later game, and they gave the 15-yard penalty. So I just had to bring that up because I was really scratching my head how it was not a 15-yard penalty. But anyway.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Apparently the refs had a bad day. I saw after the game, this all today, basically that UNLV was appealing a couple different calls.
Okay.
Against
it was it was a bad call.
Yeah,
I don't know. Again, I don't know how they did it. The other thing I did want to say with that game, anytime UNLV would get a sustained drive going, or I shouldn't say sustained, but get some sort of offense going, they would kind of bite themselves in the foot. I mean, there was a huge, they were moving the ball, and there was 3rd and 9, really good play to Jesus, jumps up, I mean, perfectly thrown ball right here, and bloop, it comes right out, and they just couldn't help themselves on offense, and you'll have that sometimes. But anyway, we won the bet.
Yeah,
happy for it.
That was a good game for us. We both picked it. You locked it.
Yeah.
And two weeks in a row, Michigan failed to cover. I do want to offer one last note on Michigan.
Okay. Yep.
You know, I've been high on them. They're a great team. They're starting out 2-0.
Yep.
They haven't covered 2 weeks in a row.
Right.
J.J. McCarthy looked fantastic.
Yes.
This weekend.
Yep.
Their winning formula has been, the last couple of years, has been to run the ball, play great defense.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're at 2-0, I've seen some of the Michigan fans, some rumbles that they're not happy with how the running game is doing.
Oh, okay.
So far. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, you know, when you win games, and sometimes the fans aren't happy that you didn't win by enough.
Sure.
But I am starting to see some rumblings out of that Michigan fan base that they're not happy with how the run.
Well, and as I say, the UNLV defense against the run was decent.
Right.
I mean, they were doing well against the run. They did awful against the pass, but they did fine against the run. So that doesn't surprise me to hear that.
All right. So Iowa and Iowa State. So I took Iowa -3.5, and they did cover, which was great. But an interesting note on that, to something we've been tracking. So we talked about the new contract for Brian Ferentz, the head coach's son, who's the offensive coordinator. He has to average 25 points a game. Last week, he missed that by 1.
Correct.
This week, he missed that by 5. They only scored 20 points. So he's down 6 for the year.
Yep. We're keeping the running total there.
Yes, we are. We're going to keep the running total, keep you guys, some people call it nepotism with, having his own son as the OC, and this is the year they put a metric on it. This is what you have to do. This is how you have to perform in order to keep your job, and so far it's not looking good.
Well, and this is so he's a -6 on that.
Yep.
And he played Fresno State, not to take anything away from them.
Right.
Awesome game.
Yep.
And they played Iowa State.
Yep.
They haven't gotten into the meaty part of their season when they're playing Big Ten schools. Yep. So not off to a great start for his average right now.
No, it's not.
We'll see what happens.
One game, if they score 30 points one game, he'll be back on the positive.
Well,
we'll see.
We're talking about Iowa.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens. All right, so going forward, UTEP and Northwestern. I said my take on this game was 2 bad teams. But I thought that UTEP might be a little bit better because Northwestern's such a disaster. Completely wrong on that. UTEP is even more of a disaster than Northwestern. 2 disasters. And so that was a loss.
Yeah, when I looked at that score, I went, whoa, wow. I mean, it was, I don't remember was it 30-something to 3 or something?
Yeah,
I don't remember. It was
not close.
It was very
Yeah,
one-sided.
Exactly, and that's an issue I've been having in this. We've been talking about this on the out-of-conference games.
Yeah,
there's some bad Big Ten teams, but how do you compare those bad Big Ten teams to bad teams from other conferences? Right. That's been a little tough.
Yep.
So obviously Northwestern, maybe they watched our podcast and they got
that's
pissed
probably
off
what
and,
it was.
And went out there and
no
took it out
about that. That was bulletin board material.
Yeah,
the TBM down.
It was. Okay, Wisconsin and Washington State. So I got to see. I was traveling on Saturday for a good part of the day, but I got home. I got to watch the entire second half of this game.
Okay.
To me, it was one of the better games of the weekend. Yeah.
We were anxiously kind of awaiting this one after Washington State's first week, so
to see how they would do.
Yeah.
So I'm still high in Wisconsin. I had taken them. I'm taking Wisconsin -6.5. Washington State got the win. It was a great win for them. So I'm half of me, I was sad. My pick didn't turn out well, but honestly, what a great atmosphere in Pullman, Washington.
Yeah.
Washington State played a great game. Wisconsin, the first half they were utterly terrible, and Washington State took it to them the first half. It was kind of a tale of 2 halves. So Wisconsin second half was just had all the momentum, was driving, was doing well. They got it to within 2 points, and then there was a controversial fumble. It seemed pretty clear in live action that the guy was down, and then the players ripped the ball out of his hands, but there was no definitive angle. So that is what it is. Washington State got the ball, and they made something of that opportunity. They got an opportunity that maybe it should have gone the other way, but when they got that opportunity, they went down, scored a touchdown, and iced the game. So great win for Washington State. I'm happy for their coach, for the team, the community there, with everything that's going on, with their uncertainty going forward. So sorry about the pick on that, but happy for Washington State. And honestly, I'm still really high on Wisconsin going forward in the Big Ten.
I know you are.
Even with this loss. So, all right. So the next game, I had Maryland covering 24.5. Mm-hmm. And then imagine my surprise when they're playing Charlotte. Okay, imagine my surprise. I look at the score at the end of the first quarter, and they're down 14-0 to Charlotte. So, as I told you, we were texting back and forth, and I told you, just give it a few weeks, and Maryland's going to be the worst 5-0 team in the country.
Sure, right.
And I still feel that way.
Yeah.
So Maryland didn't cover. That was a loss. And honestly, second half, their offense kicked it into gear, whatever. Yeah. But I mean, falling behind to a team like Charlotte, 14-0 in the first quarter, this is just terrible.
Yes.
So, all right. So last regular game, Mini in Eastern Michigan. Mm-hmm. This is one of those I was on the fence.
You were.
Should I pick it? Not pick it?
Yes.
I committed to picking every Big Ten game.
Right.
So I went ahead and said, okay, Mini, I'm going to take them to cover the 20.5. They didn't.
Right.
Their offense, their offense does not have it together. They were the better team, but just for them to cover, just their offense is just not in a position where they can cover. They always say great teams cover. Well, Mini is just a mediocre team.
Right.
So they were the better team. They didn't cover, so that was a loss.
Right.
Okay. So Nebraska and Colorado.
Yes.
When we did our reaction video last week, I gave this as an early line pick.
Yep.
Colorado -2.5.
Yep.
And then when we did our week 2 picks, I went ahead and made it a Big Mountain ice cold lock.
Yes.
You and I talked about this game. I could not believe the line was 2.5.
It didn't move.
Right.
I think up until kickoff it didn't move. Yeah. I was very surprised it didn't move. Right. That's why we wanted to get it out in last week's reaction video, because we both thought the line was going to move.
Yeah. I think it's taking a little while. Now that they're the media darling, Colorado is. But the first 2 weeks it took a little bit for Vegas and everybody to understand exactly what's going on in Colorado. So I said the line was ridiculous. I couldn't believe 2.5. I said I thought that Colorado would win by probably at least 2 touchdowns.
Yep.
Colorado, they won 36-14.
Yep.
So that was a great win for us. We had that as an early pick for people to get on early. We had it as an ice cold lock.
Yep.
And Colorado went ahead and handled business. So that was a great win for that ice cold lock. So for me, overall, on my picks, I was 3-6 on the week. So not great. But with that one ice cold lock, I was 1-0 with an emphatic victory there. So I'm hoping our viewers took that ice cold lock and made some money. I know I did.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yep. All right.
I trust you.
Okay. So honestly, that's all I have here for my picks. JY, what do you have for us?
Yeah, we'll go down what my picks were. We'll start with the Mountain West, and I did do 3 game day picks. So we'll hit them here at the end. But, the first one I had was UNLV. We already talked about them. I'm not going to go over that again. But that was an ice cold lock. So we were up 2-0 in our locks early in the day, and that was
feeling good.
That was great.
Yeah.
The next one I had was Boise, and I watched most of the Boise game. I was back and forth between a couple of different games. I was trying to watch the Boise game. I wanted to watch some of the San Diego State game and a little bit of the Oregon game since I had made that a lock. So I was trying to get them all in, but I watched mostly the Boise State versus UCF game, and it was a really good game. I mean, I go on boards. I see what people say. Of course, as we talked about, you're talking about Michigan fans. Everybody wants to win every game, and if they're not winning it by, in Michigan's case, 35 or 50, whatever,
36.5,
they're not happy enough, or the running games. So I get it. I'm not a diehard Boise State fan, so I'm viewing this a little bit more objectively, probably. But I thought they played a good game. Green went out in the game, so they had their backup quarterback in for the second half. They still hung in there. In the beginning, it was kind of a bend, don't break. UCF really drove the field quickly a few times in the beginning of the game, but the defense was able to hold them to some field goals and things. And they didn't have their number one running back.
Yeah.
And I will say, Genty, hopefully that's the right pronunciation of his name, I thought looked fantastic. Both running out of the backfield, catching out of the backfield. He looked really good. So, I couched this around a little bit. You didn't have your starting quarterback for the entire game. You didn't have your number one running back for the entire game. And you covered the spread against a decent UCF team. Yes, Boise at home. Of course, you'd love to win that game for your home fans. but nothing about that game made me concerned. I know they're 0-2 right now, but they are the team to beat in the Mountain West. I still feel that way. There was nothing there that I went, uh-oh, trouble in paradise. So, we won the pick, or I won the pick. Yep. I had money on that pick, obviously. Happy about that. But I also just want to say, it's okay, Boise fans. Yeah. They're going to be fine. Don't freak out too much.
I mean, they started the season. I mean, it's 2 solid out of conference teams playing against. There's no shame in going 0-2 there, and I think that will prepare them once they get into conference play.
Yes, and getting some of your backup, your number 2 back and your other quarterback, getting them some play right now. You never know when you're going to need some of those players in the future too. So overall, I was impressed with the game. I was impressed with Boise. Yeah, they took the loss, but hey, we won our bet, and that's what we're here for. So. Yep. Next one, San Diego State. Oh, man. I was watching that game, and it was pretty evident early on that UCLA's offense was too much for San Diego State to really handle. Yeah. It got out of hand there, and obviously was a losing pick. We had them at 14.5. I wish it was at least close, and it wasn't even that close. So definitely, while I was happy with the Boise State team, and I watched more of that game, the San Diego State side was definitely a little bit more of a downer for me, and a loss for us. So, not so great.
Something to keep in mind going forward. I think UCLA is maybe a little better than we thought they were going to be. That freshman quarterback that they brought in.
He looked very good.
Moore, I think is his name. He might be the next big thing going forward. So just something to keep in mind. Yep. If there's any other Mountain West versus UCLA. and for me to keep in mind, because UCLA is going to be part of the Big Ten next year. So.
Right, true. Yeah. You got to do a little research on them here this year and keep watching them. So my last one that I did on the preview video was Air Force at a minus 13.5, and I locked them. And I caramba that offense, Steve. Oh my goodness gracious! I still think they're over their 9.5 that I had picked them, because their defense is very, very good. Yeah. But they had something like, it was something ridiculous, 30 or 40 yards in the first half of total offense. I mean, it was unbelievable. Yeah. They did get the running game going some in the second half, but the quarterback was 1 for 3 for 14 yards.
Yeah, that's rough.
I guess my point is, I picked them at minus 13.5. When you only have one reception for 13 yards, you're likely not going to beat a spread by 2 touchdowns.
Right. And that's a good stat to look at, but I will also say something you and I have talked about since the preview episode was we weren't sure how the new rules against cut blocking were going to affect those option teams, the academies.
Right.
Air Force has had a more of a dynamic offense than the other academies the last few years. So we thought maybe that it wouldn't affect them as much, but looking at the numbers and watching them so far, I think it is affecting them. And when that run game isn't getting 5.5 yards a pop every time, then the other teams can actually play against the pass. So that when they before the teams had to sell out against the run against them, but now since they can't cut block, teams can play more of a balanced defense against them. And so if they're not going to have success running, they're not going and they're not going to have success passing. It might be a little rougher year for them than we thought.
Right.
Just mostly because of a rule change.
Right. Sure. Yeah. So that was a lock. That was a loss, unfortunately. And then I did 3 game day picks. I went 1 and 2 with those. I took YO at minus 28.5. And they did fine against Portland State. I was actually surprised they allowed 17 points against, given their defense and given Portland State. So they clearly didn't cover. Then the other one was I took Fresno coming off that big win. Yeah. They were going into back home, sellout crowd. I thought they're going to be mighty hype against an Eastern Washington team that I thought they were going to just annihilate offensively. And I didn't think Eastern Washington was going to have much offensively. So I thought it was going to be super one-sided. And it wasn't. Yeah. And I'm going to stop there because we're going to do a separate video just on that game, because there's some things I want to talk about with that. But it was a loss for us here on my game day pick. Then the one game day pick that I did win, I took the under for the Hawaii Albany game. Okay. And that one hit. So it was a 57.5 line. I think it ended up at 50. I was actually a little surprised it was at 50. If you watch that game day pick, I thought it'd be in the 40s. So they actually did a little better than I thought, but still well under, touchdown under what that line was. So we got a win there on that game day pick.
Awesome.
Then we go to our my other picks out of conference. I had Utah at -7.5. They ended up at 7. Yeah. So I know Steve. I texted Steve and he said, I guess right before the game or early Saturday, the line did move to 6.5. And so Steve got a win on that. Maybe some of you didn't see our episode, or you waited till the morning and you got the 6.5. That's great if you did. My pick was at 7.5, and they just didn't hit it. So that was a loss.
They're still having quarterback issues. They need to get their starter back healthy, I think,
yes.
to really to be at their full potential.
Yes, yeah, and I will say, now that you bring that up, Barnes was not impressive.
Not this game, no.
Just weak arm. His arm looked weak to me. Just wasn't reading things very quickly. When they brought Nate Johnson in, that's when the offense actually had some pizzazz and they could move the ball. And they would bring him in for a few plays here or there, but then they gave him the ball there at the end. And I'm like, man, if he would have been in all game, hindsight's 20/20. But if he'd have been in the whole game, they cover the 7.5. I have no doubt about it. But I was not impressed with Barnes whatsoever in that game. Then we go to another lock. So I had Oregon, and boy, did we get lucky. If you took my Oregon lock at -6.5, I was sitting on the couch watching the end of the game with my son, thinking we have a loss, and we were gifted a win. So I'll take it any way we get it. It doesn't matter how. It matters that it hits, and it hit. So that was our third out of 4 ice cold locks that we hit. Was happy to do it. Closer game than I kind of thought it might be. I'll give Texas Tech some credit here. We talked about in the pick predictions that this is a bit of a make or break. They really have to bounce back after that rough loss to Wyoming, and they did. I mean, they played a very good game. Oregon beat the spread, but not by much. So, yes, Texas Tech's 0-2, but much better game for them against Oregon at home there. So,
and I think one of the things we have to remember is these are college kids. They're
good point.
They're young and emotional,
no doubt.
That Oregon team was coming off of a blowout win, probably took Texas Tech for granted a little bit. I'm going to say, And whereas the Texas Tech, they were the opposite. They thought they were going to beat Wyoming, and that was going to be easy,
right?
And they were pissed off, and they went in and gave Oregon everything they could handle.
They did. It was a really good game. Like I said, I was kind of flipping between that game and some of the other games, so I did see some of that Oregon game, especially there at the end. Then I went to the Sun Belt for the Georgia State pick, and I do apologize. We had the wrong logo on the board up there. We had Georgia Southern, but I said Georgia State, and we were talking about UConn and who they were playing. So hopefully that didn't foul anybody up if you wanted to take that pick. But they blew through the 2.5.
Yeah.
I mean, they covered that easily, as I thought they would win the game. I didn't think they'd probably cover it by that much. But you might hear me pick Georgia State again. It depends on who they're playing and how I'm feeling about it. But a team I do like to watch, a team I do like to bet, and they're pretty good at covering spread.
You were spot on with them.
Yeah. So, again, that was a win for me. Then the last one I had USC Stanford. I took the over 69.5. That was a large amount to get to. They didn't quite get there. They got close, but they didn't quite get there. And if you remember, Steve, what did you say? You made your little crack about Stanford at the end. What do you remember what you said?
I said, I think I said, yes, USC will score 50 or 60 points. Right. But is Stanford going to get to 10? Probably not.
Right, and they scored 10.
10, okay.
Right? So when I looked at that, I went, holy cow, you jinxed me, Steve, with the 10. Could have you said, 17.
Yeah.
Because then I think we would have won it. Yeah. But anyway, it was funny. You said 10, and that's literally what they scored was 10, which I thought they would score more. That's why I was over the 69.5. I said, I think USC is going to score their points. I think Stanford's going to get enough to get us that over, and they just didn't. So, oh well, we lost on that one. So, end up for me on the day, I was 5-7 overall, so just a little bit below the 500 mark. But again, we hit 3 out of our 4 locks, which is what we're really focusing in on, and we're 5-3 on those now for the season. Mm-hmm. So doing well there. So. Why don't we put up a slide real quick? We'll do first the week 2 summary so you can see where we're at, and we'll go right into an overall cumulative for the season where we're at with our picks. right. Well, I think that about does it for the Big Mountain Podcast. Anything you want to add, Steve?
So I love those early line picks.
Oh, you have another one.
I've got another one.
Oh, another early one. Good. All right. What do we got?
So last week, I had to give you that early line pick of Colorado minus 2.5, 2.5. I thought that line would move. It ended up not moving, but I hope that people grabbed that because it was a great win for us.
Yes.
This week. And I've tried to stay away from Penn State picks a little bit. Just, I don't want to be...
they did
look like a homer.
They did beat the spread.
They did. Yes.
Okay.
So 2 weeks in a row.
Yes.
They're 2-0. They beat the spread.
Yep.
So this week I'm gonna go with my Penn State Nittany Lions.
Okay.
Minus 14.5 over Illinois.
Okay.
One, I think that I think that Penn State's met my expectations for this year, maybe even a little bit more. Mm-hmm. It's hard to gather too much from them playing Delaware.
Right. Since that's a little hard to tell on that
right.
one,
but with the two
West
games
Virginia
together,
one, was
yes.
Yeah.
And the thing that I like about Penn State so far, very balanced offense. They have a good running game, and Drew Aller has lived up to every expectation so far. Has not turned the ball over once. Is extremely efficient, high passer rating. I think he completed a pass to 8 different receivers this week.
Wow. Okay.
So just a great combination, balanced offense. In Illinois, we talked about Illinois. I really expected their defense to be better this year.
Yeah.
And after being number 1 in the country last year, they're number 106 this year, and I don't think they've played anybody at the caliber even close to Penn State.
Right.
So I'm going to go ahead and give a Big Mountain ice cold lock as an early line.
Fantastic.
Big Mountain ice cold lock of PSU minus 14.5 over Illinois.
I mean, you're thinking that's probably at least 3 touchdowns.
I definitely I think so. I would say at least 17 points, but 20 could be 20
maybe
plus.
20, 21.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's fantastic. That was a surprise to me. I didn't know you were coming with one of them.
Yeah, I had to.
Awesome.
So I'm giving you an early line and an ice cold lock. So
excellent.
That's what I got.
All right. Well, then that does do it for this episode of the Big Mountain Podcast. Like I said earlier, we're going to have a special Fresno State summary. We want to look into that and see what in the world happened out there. It's certainly not what I think many of us were expecting to have happen. And we're also going to do an update on conference realignment and expansion. Some things have just come out here in the last couple days as well. So look for those to drop here shortly. And we'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.